Hi guys, in this tutorial I'm going to show you about what is the pivot points and how we can use it, and how it helps us to create our objects and to work with these 3D Max. Okay, let's create the box here. Okay, and as you see, we have this axis here showing us where is the z-axis and y-axis and x-axis, and it shows us that we can move it through this way, and this way. Okay, and we might ask why it's on this center in the middle of this object and why it's on the ground, like not in the center. It's because it's by default it gets on the ground and in the middle. So what is it and what can we do with it? For instance, if we rotate our box, this point is gonna be the center of our object. So when we rotate it, as you see, we rotate around this point. Okay, and you can see it from the blue that we create here. It basically shows us the angles, and you see the numbers here and you see numbers here. Okay, but what if we want to rotate our box from this corner, not here? And we can do it, and this point which we rotated around called the pivot point, and it's basically the center of our object, and when we rotate, when we scale, it stays the same. We do everything around this point. We just don't notice this anchor point when we move it, but when you rotate it or when you scale it, for instance, when you want to scale this part, the pivot stays the same and the up part goes like this. So if we want to scale it from the different point, we need to move our pivot point to a different angle, to different place. And in order to do this, we can go to the third panel, which is the hierarchy panel, and press affect pivot only. And by pressing this button, nothing changes, but when we move the object itself is not moving. We can move only the pivot of this object, and if we move it like this to this point and then we deactivate this button, our pivot point moves to this part, to this place, and basically now the center of this object is here. And if we choose to rotate, and as you see, we can rotate our object from this point, and it's basically the central point of the object. Now if we press the scale, nothing gonna change when we scale it to the up, but if we scale it to the left, we can see that it's a little bit different. And if we press this button again and move it a little bit higher, or like to the center, and let's turn off, and when we press this button by the scale like this, and we're gonna see that it scales down and up together because this point is in the middle. And we have this nice button here. For instance, if we moved the pivot to somewhere else, and if we want to make it centered, if we want to move our pivot exactly to the center of our object, we just press this button, center to the object, and it comes exactly to the center. And this is nice, this is useful because we can't exactly find the center of this object by our hands, by ourselves. So it's really useful. Maybe you can think that it's easy to find because it's box, but what if you have the teapot? For instance, you have teapot and you don't know where is exactly the center of this teapot. So you press this hierarchy button, go to affect pivot only, and press center to object. and this is basically the center of this object. And I'm sure that if you'd asked to find the center of this teapot, you would do it like this, because this is the biggest part and our brain thinks the center of this teapot is the center of this big part, but it's not like this. When we press center to object, we see it goes to a different place, but when we rotate it, as you see, it rotates along this point. And if we can, for instance, move the pivot to this part, we're gonna rotate this along this point, and by this you can achieve nice results. So when somebody asks you what is the pivot point, now you know it. So I hope it helped. Thank you a lot, and see you on the next tutorial.